bit about showing you some of the initial baby paintings that I did, or baby artwork pieces that I did. I thought I would kind of bring them out and just show you one that I think I kind of started. It was kind of my first kind of like little idea of seeing something in nature, and in this case it's not even nature, it's just a piece of garbage, you know. Seeing it on the street and seeing the spatial qualities in it and the materiality of it, and it, you know, can't help but with my interest in ancient cultures kind of driving me into this sort of concept of looking at it through an eye as an Egyptian historian, you know. So I mean, I know it sounds a little far-fetched, but when you see the piece, but it just drove my idea of the space and form of the piece. And I'll pull it up. It's just a little piece of cardboard that I had found on the street, and I don't know if you can see it properly with the bad lighting that's in here, but I'll pull it back a bit, and I'll bring it a little closer. But you can see that, you know, the cardboard, it was torn apart. There's a perforation, possibly the form that, you know, of an opening at the top of the cardboard that was part of the initial construction of, say, probably a box or a piece of cardboard. But if you get closer, you know, I can bring in can show the materiality of it. It has a texture to it, almost like brick-like. It's you know, it's corrugated, so it has this kind of quality where it has a brick-like quality, and that kind of drove kind of an idea of, you know, it being a structure, and the piece being kind of an ancient wall or a tunnel or it just drove that spatial quality. It was just such a nice basic form that I couldn't help but just sort of envision kind of this wall structure in an Egyptian rune, or some type of a piece that, you know, had this sort of vertical and horizontal quality. So I mean, it's I don't know if you can see it clearly enough, but as you can see, just the composition of it alone, a piece of nature that you kind of find on the street, the spatial quality of it and the compositional quality of it has sort of this intriguing sort of aspect to it. So that kind of brought me to think of these pieces that were found objects on the street, and just I grabbed a few more, you know, that I had seen and brought them together, similar sort of idea, and this time was kind of looking for more for an organic form. And literally these are just tin can pieces that were kind of lying on the street, and I collected them and brought them into a composition. Couldn't help but play with the colors and quality and texture of the pieces, and just put them in an organic context. I threw a piece or two of actual organic matter in there, just kind of brought it to life. And so these are two kind of baby pieces that kind of, you can see that the qualities of found objects just on the street as they're kind of clumped together. You know, couldn't help but kind of bring out ideas of other forms that would not normally be there in your mind, you know. So I mean, those are kind of the ideas of using sort of these organic pieces together. Once kind of like I thought of that idea as being the driving force for the pieces, I was looking for other forms that might drive other drawings more on a better level or more complicated level. And then I looked into some of the wallpaper that I had on the walls of my home, and there was a beautiful form of wallpaper that had this effervescence sort of look to it and really stylized quality. And so I'll get you this piece here, and very close to the pattern. You can see that it's actually wallpaper, and it's the form in the wallpaper that's driving the form of the woman. The woman wasn't an intentional drawing. it actually, it came about by looking at a pattern that was already there. So I'm hoping I'm doing it justice, but the legs, the waist, the pattern of the breasts, and all the other patterns that are in the painting are driven by these wallpaper patterns that are shaped along the lines of all the patterns that are in the wallpaper. So, I mean, if you're talking about just doing a drawing, getting stuck and without being able to kind of force, you feeling like you're forcing yourself into a drawing, I mean, just by looking at the pattern of the context of the piece as a background, you can see how this could have been a driving factor in me just effortlessly picking up and drawing this woman. I'll zoom in on the facial qualities of the person. It's a little tricky to do. This thing's a bit heavy, and it's hard to get a good angle. I must say, I didn't realize it would be the lighting and quality wouldn't be so good, but you can see the facial qualities that are there. I think the pattern of the face is the same pattern that's in the body. It just gets generated at a different scale. So the curves and textures of the wallpaper form and the light that shines off of it create, you know, these patterns in nature that are translated into forms that are of manufactured things, even the lamp in the picture. So again, this is sort of a mid-level sort of a painting that was used to come up with these forms. So yeah, it gets more and more developed. I can show you, and I'll turn around and show you one of them a bit more larger scale pieces that I kind of did after some of these, and it became one that used the texture of plywood and the form and context of what I saw in it to drive this one. And it's a large scale piece. It kind of manifested into this idea of nature and the creation idea that was done, you know, over and over again by many artists. But I just used this idea of creativity coming back and forth between the piece and my own mind to kind of generate this sort of birth of Venus idea. So I'll show you some of it. It starts off with this plywood texture, and you can see the prominent plywood texture that's in that painting. It kind of became more and more following the patterns that in the plywood that was a random pattern, but became more and more form oriented the closer I looked at it. So here you can see a large elephant in the pattern, and it's done with very few colors and strokes to kind of create this form. So you'd be surprised that a lot of the pattern was directly in there in the first place. A couple smaller elements kind of brought out the overall form, and like the eye of the elephant kind of gave it a kind of a consciousness that I liked. And so the legs of the woman, kind of almost fabric-like, kind of was brought out, creating the woman's form. And a lot of the pieces up there, including at the very top, there's like this monkey sort of figure, sort of handing this and birthing this egg to this woman, kind of the creation of everything, kind of back and forth between that being, that concept or idea that I kind of worked with. So I can pull it back and you can see the overall scale of it, and just sort of that idea of how this form could have generated these pieces inside the painting with little effort. I mean, all these elements were there. I just brought them out, and This is one at a fairly large scale. It was the first one that I did like this. The other ones I think became a little bit more and more refined. So I think I became a little bit better at doing these pieces. I'll show you one that used the materiality on the next piece that I did, and it involved this piece here. It's using the stains and forms that are in a plywood piece on a door that I had found, and if you look closely, the actual form of the woman, the breasts, the stomach, the abdomen, they're actually not something that I drew, but they were just inherently there already in the piece. I kind of worked from that and used the idea of the woman to bring out and play with the landscape, the context of a woman, and basically my background, and the thought of this sort of landscape, and sort of abandonment of this woman context. It's a nice piece. It's not showing if it's showing up very well in the colors that would be showing up on this computer, but just the use of the materials spoke to me. The background, the roughness, the colors, all kind of worked together to kind of start a piece that in the end turned out fairly nice. This was, like I said, a couple years ago. I'll show you another piece that is probably a better detailed piece for this. Again, it's using plywood and the grains in the plywood, and just the materiality back and forth, creating a compositional landscape. It's kind of got this real shimmer to it, and a kind of a real spatial quality that I like. There's another one that I used, and it just shows you can, at many levels, many scales, use the materiality. And plywood is a fun one to use. I've used particle board and plaster, but here's one that has a nice quality. And it's amazing, like how your form, the figure, human form, can be found in the grains of plywood. That's basically the arm of the man in the figure, and you can see how when you follow the patterns that are inherent in the plywood or any context, that there's a real organic form in there that's almost alive. The arm and the shoulder, the face and the neck, all these elements, the breast, the stomach, they're all following the patterns in the plywood. It's quite unbelievable that something can come to life that's just already there. Like how you find something that's just already in the forms, in the plywood. And I guess this can be done with almost every way of finding art, finding your pieces and using them to kind of bring out what you want. I'm hoping that explains a small amount of what I've been doing here. Thanks.